Hello everybody, I'm a bit like a boss at the moment. I don't do a video for several months and then a bunch come along at once. That's because we're in the middle of Tourbillons, which I'm going to expand on a little bit in this reading, but my main focus is to begin exploring the Tree of Life in relation to the decade system of the tarot, which I alluded to in the main Tourbillons reading. Now this is a system that I've been thinking about this for a while, how best the tarot should be arranged on the Tree of Life. I've never, even though the tarot books I've published by Moiba Shmakov, etc. might have their own theories about this, I've not paid too much attention to what other people have said about the placement of cards on the Tree of Life, because I really wanted to figure it out for myself, a system that worked for me. So what I'm going to read now is kind of me trying to form my own system. It might well be that somebody else has already come up with this, because to my mind it's very logical, and therefore it would make sense if it was also logical to somebody else. So, you know, if you've heard about it appearing somewhere else, please do let me know, because it's always good to have some kind of affirmation of your thinking around these things. But people who've read Shmakov's book and managed, he is complicated, and kind of understood some of his main themes, will realise that the decade system is really important and a really intuitive way of understanding the tarot. It immeasurably deepens our understanding of it, and as he points out himself, the relations between cards in the decades. So by that I would mean there's 10 cards in between. So if the first arcanum is the Magician, then Force, number 11, is its corresponding card in the second decade. Okay, the first 10 arcana are static and sephirothic, and the second 10 are dynamic, and as we learned from Shmakov the last time, they constitute complete and perfect tourbillons in their own right. And if you have some classic tarot cards and you have a look at the pictures of the second the second decade in the major arcanum from Force onwards, you'll notice that you'll start to notice symbolically how the tourbillons are built in. In some of the cards it's incredibly obvious. I do have a pack here, I've not got any, if one comes up that's relevant I'll show you. I'll just kind of shuffle through as I'm speaking just so I can show you an example. But some of the cards in the major arcana, the tourbillons, the double system is quite obvious. Now I got a video taken down for showing the star card because it said it was nudity and sexual content, so I'm going to just, I know this is absolutely ridiculous, but you'll see here what I mean. There's 2 vases that she's pouring from into the stream. That would be an example of a tourbillon in action, because we've always got 2 equal and opposing forces in a tourbillon, an occult tourbillon. Okay, so I've kind of only really made rough notes, and I've taken a couple of pieces, extracts from the Tarot Miners actually for this, so it's a little bit rough and ready, but I do want to share it just in case anybody has any comments. And to do a reading like this also helps me to form it more coherently in my own mind as I'm going along. So as I've already said, there's going to be 2 right, I've not already said this. I said it in my head, I don't think I've said it to you. In this system that I've worked out, I've placed 2 cards on each sephira, except for the bottom 2 cards, which correspond to Shin and Tao, the Fool and the World, because they are paired with each other. This will become clear as it goes down. Also want to, just before we go any further, remind us that the Tree of Life does work in two different directions, from the top down and the bottom up, either in a zigzag motion, which I suggest will be more usual on the way down, because you'd go from Ein Sof, Kita, Hokmah, Bina, Da'ath, etc. I do have Da'ath as an integrated Sephira, not one that's slightly outside. This is different to classical and traditional Tree of Life interpretations, Tree of Life being based on the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. I follow what I believe is a kind of seminal work by the contemporary Kabbalist Patrick Mulcahy, who works in Australia, and he did a kind of a tarot reading for me once, or actually an astrology reading for me once, which was great. But I think he has really, really cracked the code of the Sefer Yetzirah insofar as it relates to the structure of the Tree of Life. It may be quite difficult to accept that if you've worked your whole occult career with a different system, a more classical system. I hadn't until I read his book, and it was the only thing that ever made sense to me with relation to the structure of the Tree of Life. Anyway, one of the main points of that is he does have Da'ath as an integrated Sephira. Also Ein Sof, rather than Tifereth, which is more the goal of the Tree of Life, the Holy Palace, the Merkaba, and also Malkuth, okay, because various reasons that he talks about in his book, Sefer Yetzirah Magic. I don't necessarily agree with the way he translated the term, the relevant term in the Book of Formation, Belimar. He translated this as meaning without Malkuth, but nevertheless, I do think it makes sense that because this is the Book of Formation, therefore we're thinking about things more astrally, that the world is not necessarily integrated into that in a physical way. Okay, so anyway. So Tree of Life works in two directions, zigzag and in a straight line if you come back up the middle pillar, as we would greatly hope and desire to do in an ideal world, in a flash. And it really does constitute a tourbillon in its own right, because we also have the pillar of mercy and the pillar of strength or severity, two equal and opposed, or at least balanced, forces. And it's a closed system. So for me, this is kind of a tourbillon in its own right. And now in my own notes, I've just written an extract from the Eight of Coins. Again, got to be careful with this picture. Eight of Coins from the Moebius Tarot Minors, where, so I'm just making sure my camera's still on. We want to highlight the absolute need for purification and harmonisation of the personality before any other spiritual work is undertaken. If you did listen to the last video about tourbillons, where I mentioned the group setting, where we were working with meditation on the tarot and we never got past the magician, and after about 2 decades I thought, is this because we hadn't done the necessary work on ourselves? Which you should do really before trying to attempt group work, otherwise you bring your own weird messed up forces and energies into a group setting, and then if anybody's done occult work in a group that ends up with flame throwing and strange energies, you know, I call it flame throwing, work within a closed circle. Anyway, the simultaneous rotation of the two squares of the symbol of the Eight of Coins in opposite directions symbolises the two aspects of creative process. The involuted, that is, the immersion of the subtle and the dense, or the that which creates us aspect, and the evolutionary, when we consciously make the dense more subtle, that is, we create ourselves. Okay, so if we've got a simultaneous rotation of two squares, again, we've got a tourbillon. So basically, the more we read into the tarot, the more these overarching themes, such as the resolving of binaries and the force of the magus, which is done through tourbillons, become apparent. So it really does help to bring the whole work and the whole study together, to consider it in terms of these major themes. So now I've started to go through the Tree of Life with the relevant cards. Like I said, I don't have my tarot deck in order, so I can't really, flip them up like I do sometimes. But so Ein Sof. Now the perfect number of Kabbalah is 10, 10 not 9, 10 and not 11. Therefore, I wanted to place the Wheel of Fortune at the top in this position, where it signifies the cosmos and its irrevocable laws. I also want to point out that 1 plus 0 equals 1, which will make sense in a moment. The Hebrew letter associated with the wheel is Yod, which is also the crown of the Hebrew alphabet and its instigating power. This is where it begins with the spark. 10, the perfect number, 10, the cosmic wheel, Yod, the crown, and the spark. Now, in the Decad system, paired with the 10th arcanum is the 20th. Makes sense? The Judgment, which also expresses an ultimate cosmic power, this time over the fate of the microcosmic monads of humanity. And I also want to point out that 2 plus 0 equals 2. Okay. From Ein Sof, through the process of emanation, we of course go to Kita. The cosmic emanations thereby reach the Magician, Arcanum 1. 1 plus 0 equals 1, remember? So this reinforces the connection between Ein Sof and Kita on the tree. The integral connection between those two, both being a crown in their own right. So Arcanum 1, the Magician, this is where the process begins for the monad, having received the influx from the cosmic source, the source of divinity at the top of the tree. This is letter Aleph, the sign of the Magician, the first mother letter, divine breath, and the number 1. So twinned with the Magician is its corresponding arcanum in the second decad, which is Force. This is its feminine counterpart. This is where the concentration without effort, which is the attainment of the Magician, has clearly become perfected through actual praxis. If you can envisage the card, the Force card in the classical tarot, this is the divine feminine, the virgin holding fast the mouth of the lion, the subtle overcoming the dense. And number 11, 1 plus 1 equals 2. So in this way, Ein Sof and Kita really are in a great balanced harmony together, as they ought to be in a balanced Tree of Life model. From Kita, I'm doing it as if I'm looking at it, so I'm sorry if it's the wrong way around for you guys, but I can't draw it backwards because I'll get confused. But from Kita, so we're then going to go to Hokmah, where I have placed the High Priestess, Arcanum 2, signified by Beth. So we've gone from Aleph to Beth, the alphabet. And the High Priestess, this is where wisdom builds her house. And I do have this one to hand. I'll just make sure my camera is actually showing it. Yep, you can see that the High Priestess has the book on her lap. Okay, this is where wisdom builds her house, in the position of Hokmar, and she accepts the influx from Kita. Twinned with the High Priestess in Hokmar is the corresponding arcanum in the second decad, which is Lamed, the Hanged Man, Arcanum 12. And for me here, this signifies the action of wisdom as renunciation and the suffering which accompanies the soul of the Messiah. This brings a pinnacle of divine wisdom to the top of the Pillar of Mercy in Hokmar, with the Hanged Man and the High Priestess. From Hokmar to Binah, where I've placed the Empress, Arcanum 3, Gimel, the third part of this upper triad of Kita, Hokmar and Binah at the top of the tree. And this is the divine ternary, the Godhead, carrier of divine magic in the Empress, who reflects the wisdom of Hokmar with understanding in the sphere of Saturn, which is Binah, at the top of the pillar of severity. Now the twin of in the second decad of the Empress is, of course, Arcanum 13. The Empress is 3, therefore Arcanum 13 corresponds because there's 10 in between. And this is Death, Mem, the second mother letter, the holy water. And for me, this signifies a kind of dying to the self in order to achieve oneness with the Godhead, which is the ultimate form of renunciation as shown by Lamed in Hokmar, and also the gateway to renewal and resurrection in Kita, where we had the judgment, if you recall, alongside the magician. And here it's useful to point out that we have got a double action, so these placements aren't just relevant for when you're on the way down the tree, it's also for when you're on the way up. So certain things might make more sense in the upward move, others in the downward. Should work both ways equally well. Now, as I mentioned at the start, in the way I understand the tree of life, Da'ath is next, after Binah. And this, for me, is the door, which I've mentioned before in other meditations, where I actually have the I am the door section of the I am prayer over Da'ath. This is I call it the quaternary door here, because by the time we've got the triangle at the top of Kita, Hokmar and Binah, and then Da'ath would be the fourth point there. As the quaternary, where the wheel to the lower spheres is set into motion, we have Arcanum 4, of course, the Emperor. Here, also a kind of threshold guardian, and signifying the authority of the cross of the elements, a sentry over the abyss, which is Da'ath, which must be crossed in order to finally reach this Godhead. And Da'ath is also the covenant, where the covenant between God and humanity is made. in Kabbalistic texts, I'm thinking actually of the gates of light, the Shah aura. I do have a copy down here somewhere. I can never find these things. But that's a very interesting book for understanding Da'ath and the covenant of Da'ath, and how the covenant of Da'ath is absolutely indispensable. Like, it's impossible to experience the fulfillment of this covenant without Da'ath. So this is a really, they're all important, of course, but this, you know, it's also positioned on the middle pillar and is incredibly key. Anyway, twinned with the Emperor here is a second threshold guardian, which is the 14th arcanum, Temperance, the guardian angel. The Emperor is associated with Daleth, and the guardian angel with Nun, the letter Nun. And the angel, of course, is the safeguard of the human soul as it prepares to meet its great test over the abyss. So when you reach this quite potentially, it will be devastating position at the edge of the abyss, at least your guardian angel will be there to travel with you, which is the trauma and suffering and pain, the searing, scourging pain that will accompany the crossing of the abyss is made very beautiful by the presence of your guardian angel with you on that journey. Now here I've made another little point about Da'ath that kind of occurred to me, which seemed intuitively correct. So I've said, from the point of Da'ath and all the preceding Sephiroth, the Qliphoth do not take the binary form of evil. And the good-evil binary must be resolved by each monad before it can further progress. That is, it must already be unified in principle with the Godhead, if that makes sense. So the Qliphoth is the dark side, the shadow side of the Tree of Life. You don't want to get stuck in the Qliphoth, and I've thought about this a lot, and there have been works written just about the Qliphoth, but to me that's too dualistic to have a good and an evil side point blank on the tree. And I do not think that all of the Sephirah have this inherently dangerous evil aspect to them, especially not at the top, where by which point unification is already guaranteed. So that's another, like the guardian angel, kind of inbuilt safety net, if you will, which I think is quite useful to know, that you don't necessarily have to just be completely stuck on the dark side. Okay, you could perhaps go down or up in a different direction to escape that situation. And what have I said here? So remember that I'm describing the tree from the top down. The monad must also be able to move back up this circuit of force. The monad will therefore be tested at the gateway to the upper spheres, that is Da'ath, before returning to the Godhead, having completed its journey. So from Da'ath to back to the Pillar of Mercy, Chesed, which is topped by the upper spheres of divine wisdom. So we've been through the spheres of divine wisdom, understanding, magic and renunciation. And the sphere of the Emperor and the Guardian Angel. We now arrive at the sphere of mercy, which is a great place to have Arcanum 5, the Hierophant, and the holy letter He. The second clause of the Tetragrammaton. Remember, we mustn't forget that this is built in, and I just kind of went with, this is not the traditional way of doing it, but you know, I'm just still working with this. So from Yod, in Ein Sof, we've now arrived at Hey, having completed this divine process at the top of the tree. So the second clause of the Tetragrammaton, from the macrocosmic Ein Sof to the microcosmic monad in Hey. This is also the sphere of Jupiter, so they say. Let's stay with that. The Hierophant, fifth arcanum, signifies the human pentagram, and its binary shadow side in this sphere is arcanum 15, which is the devil. And as we learned in the Tourbillons teaching, the devil card really is the Tourbillons card. That's where it's being described. And if you recall what we said about it, just to remind ourselves that in the picture of that card, the Pope has the two aspirants kneeling and the devil has the two slaves before it. These two forces, again, which is symbolically built into so many images in the tarot. Now here, of course, we are meeting a Qliphoth, because the devil is on the dark side of this, the shadow side. Now if Hey belongs to the Hierophant, it's Samek with the devil, a letter which actually resembles, I guess, the snake biting its tail, a closed vortex. We must remember to comprehend and acknowledge this, to not commune with it, just as you would not want to fall into the Qliphoth and be captured by the black magic and go around forever stuck in that Qliphothic sphere on that side of the tree. Now then, let's say we're not on that side of the tree, we're sticking with the right side of the tree. From Chesed on the sphere of mercy, we go to Gevurah on the pillar of severity. Now then, as we get further down, the challenges of the pentagram, the human being, the monad, intensify. Okay. Gevurah is where traditionally the shattering of the vessels occurs. This process of falling starts to, the trigger for the fall will come in this sphere. I have this card to hand. No, that's not that one. Because what I've put with Gevurah is Arcanum 8, Justice, which I think makes sense. This is Chet, the Hebrew letter Chet. Justice, because this is where the shattering of the spheres occurs. This is the sphere of severity. The influx of divine emanations proves too great to be held by the increasingly polarized monad. And also the sorrows inherent in a failure to meet the challenge of justice is signified in the Qliphoth of this sphere. The corresponding arcanum to Arcanum 8 is 18, which is the moon. That's not fun times. Even though we all like looking at the moon tarot card is not fun. That's Sadiq. I won't describe what the letters themselves mean, because that would be another layer of massive complexity that I can't get into right now, but that's the letter that's associated with it. But the moon, so the Qliphoth here, backsliding, despair, depression, fear, all these, everything negative is happening here in the moon arcanum and in the Qliphoth of the sphere of Gevurah. This could be a place where the monad might realise it's not strong enough to reascend, and also where it realises that it's weak enough to fall. And the severity of this process is expressed by the planetary ruler of the Sephira, which is Mars. Now I've said here we should see the Five of Wands of the Minor Arcana. And I've even... Right, I seem to have written some of this out. So, the Five of Wands, traditional titles, Grand Balance, or just Balance. He quotes from John, the will of the Father who sent me. Or in the case of the disciples' missions, as a reflection of the divine will and the master's will, leading the initiated disciple to carry out the mission entrusted to him or her. The infinite mercy that characterised the experience of Chesed, the preceding arcanum, the Hierophant, in this one becomes limited, manifesting itself in the world in the form of a determined mission. In other words, mercy becomes balanced by the principle of legality, i.e. justice, that is, by what constitutes the necessary environment and the individual and personal possibilities of initiation. And as I say, we see this principle of legality and balance clearly expressed by the card of the 8th major arcanum, which is justice. So in Kabbalistic language, the Sephira Gedula has become as if limited by the Sephira Gevura. It is the great balance path of the initiative ones, who consciously wills the divine will. There is no external law that will interfere with this mission. In Cups, the theurgic initiation rose in the great waves of the ocean of universal life to the plane of infinite light, filling your cup there so that the content could be shared with the world. In Wands, the rise of the wave can occur until it looks like a separation from the ocean. Every wave that rises in that ocean is an individuality that rises. Going up always higher, it reaches the monad. Excuse me. Although the waves that rose the most seem to isolate themselves from the ocean, they remain attached to it at their base, and each one contains within itself the properties of the entire ocean. The more the wave, i.e. the human being, rises above the general level, the more pronounced their individuality becomes, and the greater their ability to express themselves through personality. Most human beings, particles of the ocean, do not seek to rise above the general level to form waves. Their distance from the fountain of light is so great, the spiritual principles sunk in the astral and physical envelopes, that they completely identify with their own personality. The mystery of the formation of the personality, a consequence of the separation from the superior plane, is one of the most important elements of the 21st major arcanum, the arcanum Shin, which I'll therefore expand upon when I get to that. In the meantime, back to the core, the tree, Tifereth. Okay, so even though in this system it's not one of the 10 not 9, 10 not 11, as specified in the Book of Formation, it is nonetheless important for it. It's still this sphere of beauty, and in fact it's all the greater because this is the Holy Palace. This is the scene of the creation of the Merkava, and that's why it is somewhat separate, because this is an attainment in Tifereth. It's very So as I've written here, Chesed, Gevura and Da'ath, together with 3 lower spheres, converge in the Holy Palace of Tifereth with Vow, wherein resides the lovers, the 6th arcanum here, the lovers, and the first great test of the descending monad. Remember, the vessels have shattered, we're on our way down, but at this point in Tifereth it still feels good. And this is where the choice is made. Are you going to stay and remain united in perfection with the upper spheres and the Godhead, or will it fulfill its imperative as a human monad towards freedom, multiplicity and individuality? The answer is yes. The human being will fulfill this imperative, and that's why, as we mentioned in the last video about tourbillons, we do fall. This is the fall. It will be experienced as a fall, and it is a fall, but it's still an assertion of freedom and it's still what's needed in order to complete the wheel and the tree, and to not remain hanging, refusing to go down. If you don't, jump, you'll be pushed sooner or later. So we always choose the latter, or else fail in the fullness of human development. After all, we are here human. Earth is a mystery school, and we've still got to learn those lessons. Therefore, the Lovers, Arcanum 6, where if you recall there, the vortex is very, very clearly shown with the choice of the Lovers. The Tower, Arcanum 16, Iron, this is clearly the Fall, as you can see in the symbol of that card. And it's the consequence of the shattering of the spheres of unity in Gavura. Now the presence of Vow, the Lovers, in this Sephira is very important, as I mentioned last time. This is the middle pillar. This is your spinal column of the tree, where the vow is at the top. This is the way of beauty. It's crowned at the peak of the Godhead in Ein Sof, and expressed in both the Emperor, seat of authority, Empress, seat of divine magic, High Priestess, seat of wisdom, and the Magician, the perfected human and transfigured Messiah. Through Vow is the covenant made with the Godhead in the Earth, remember. This becomes apparent on the way back up. And it's therefore fitting for this to be the position of the third clause of the Tetragrammaton. We've got our priest with Hay. This is the Vow. And it's in this position, it's connected with both Yod at the top and Hay as well. And also bear in mind that on the Great Arcanum of Magic, the six-pointed star, the hexagram, also has the vow in it. It has the twin forces of the tourbillons, the marriage of opposites inherent in the upward and the downward pointing triangle. This also signifies the cube of space and the Merkaba at the centre of the tree of life, and the fiery water, a legend, an emetic legend of the fiery water, where the pathways having been purified by fire, Shin, which we're going to come to, and the holy water, the fiery water is created in Tifereth. So from here we go to Netzach and Hod, because Netzach and Hod, like our two legs, are completely these are intertwined. You can't have one without the other. So we have the sphere of Venus and the sphere of Mercury together here, mysteriously interchangeable. Okay, Aphrodite, the hermaphrodite, between those two. Netzach, and here's, actually I do have this card, this is the one from earlier, location of Arcanum 7, let me just check you can actually see that, I'll show my video, yeah. And the Chariot, if you recall, we also went into this a great deal in the main Tourbillons reading, because you can see the light and dark horses, or sphinxes, whatever they're going to be, in working here. So Arcanum 7, the Chariot, Victory, Zion. So having taken the plunge, fallen, the monad is immediately impressed with a sense of victory, of having done what it needs to do by asserting its freedom and multiplying. It's also presented with the hazard of choices indicated by the number 7. So at this critical juncture on the pillar of mercy, the falling soul is given a guiding light in the form of a star, Arcanum 17 pair, which ensures hope is still accessible for the duration of the descent. The star of hermeticists. And it will also, for the upwardly ascending monad, it provides a similar function, also providing some respite to the soul from the horrors of the Qliphoth. It's functioning here as a kind of sun at midnight. Remember, in the two spheres higher up on the tree of life, Chesed and Gevurah, we do have a Qliphothic aspect to greatly challenge us before we achieve full union with the Godhead. So Hod, as I've said, always works in conjunction with Netzach, and therefore the interchangeable planets of Mercury and Venus between these two. This, with Hod, I have Arcanum 9, the Hermit, Teth, who lights the path with the bright morning, evening star and mercurial gift of synthesis in Hod. Also with the Hermit, in the Sephirah shines the sun, Resh, Arcanum 19, another beacon of hope for the aspirant, which with the star indicates the bliss of the true lovers which it's connected with in Tifereth, even during the fall. That's what tempts you, that's what makes you able to brave the fall. The sun and the star together help to safeguard the integrity of the monad at a delicate phase in the ascent when discouragement can be very strong also. So Netzach and Hod together form an emetic tourbillon, as do Chesed and Gevurah above. And this double tourbillon helps to generate the Merkabah at the centre in Tifereth, providing it's balanced. Now we're getting towards the bottom of the tree. In Patrick Mulcahy's system, Yesod is the bottom. The last of the 10 not 9, 10 not 11 of the Book of Formation. And in some occult schools, a Yesod can be considered the sphere of the Holy Spirit. And fittingly, in this context, this is where I've placed the Fool, whose esoteric name is love. If you think about the upward journey, this is where the innocent neophyte, filled with elan, joy, the quintessence, the fifth element, is at the first step of the upward journey, as well as the bottom of the descent. At the opposite side of the wheel to Ein Sof, the bottom of the middle pillar, with so many wonders in the past and the future. The Fool is Shin, the third mother letter, by which means the pathways are purified from the bottom of the tree, which is watered from above by the holy water of Mem and vivified by Aleph. Through Shin is the aspirant purged of all impurity. Remember, we've already said that we need to do proper purification for this to work, otherwise we're going to get stuck in those Qliphoth that would hinder him or her upon the path. As the tetragrammaton is formed on the side of the pillar of mercy, we've had our Yod He Vav Hey forming with the Hey on the side of the Hierophant at the top in Chesed, well, near the top in Chesed. By the same token, we have the mother letters acting through that of severity, because if you recall, we have Mem with Bina at the top, the Elohim. The tetragrammaton is the merciful aspect, and the Elohim, the severe. So that's not always understood. So the mother letters together and the tetragrammaton also are a balanced tourbillon, which are working upon the Merkabah in the centre of all this, your soul. So, having got to Yesod, returning to the expansion to the minor arcanum in the Five of Wands, the personality can be formed either from above or from below. The greater the above influence, the more the personal aspect is dissolved in it. The more formed of the lower it is, of the physical and astral matter, in which the higher principles are immersed, the more pronounced will be the personal aspect, and the more the human being will be subject to illusions. The Wands initiate completely dominates the mystery Shin, that is, has the power to form his personality from above, to manifest through the non-manifested, to concentrate in it the principle of divine will, renouncing their own even when it's totally harmonious, and this will be necessary to get up that middle pillar and attain the covenant of the earth. That's why the mantle of the Fool, of the Virgin, and the concept of the blindfolds is necessary. The limitation of yourself, of offering yourself directly in the service of the divine, takes place in the subjective ascent of the One's initiate by the passage to the Sephira of Harmony, Tifereth. There the initiate is fully identified with the divine will. The result is perfect internal harmony, because harmony is the consequence of balanced synthesis of opposing principles. The realization of the missions entrusted by the high, the divine, characterizes the suit of Wands, which is the final, the highest of the suits. The fifth arcana of the suit corresponds to concentration and realization of the divine will. Again, remember, concentration without effort. The magician is at the top of this pillar, giving it through its mission an individual hue and a specific direction. This will be personal to you. The cup stage, by contrast, was expressed by a mode of expansion, which looked like they're unlimited, a state that corresponds to the Oriental formula Tat Twam Asi. In Wands, this expansion is limited, taking the form of a well-defined mission, requiring a kind of internal self-determination corresponding to the formula This is me. The victory of the Fool is to be seen at the top of the middle pillar, where the rectified and reintegrated magus, purified by fire and water, is distilled to the divine breath and perfectly able to channel the divine will with his wand, which emanates to Keter from Yod, the point of concentration within Ein Sof. Now, not forgetting Malkuth, because we're still doing them all. The last one, so here we have, of course, the world, the Shekinah, the ultimate reward, like Tifereth, the reward and quest of the monad is the Shekinah. The Fool is united, of course, and filled with the joy of Shekinah, the divine feminine, which reflects back the macrocosmic impulse. This is the Tao of fulfillment and completion, forming the perfectly balanced tourbillon with the 10th and 1st arcana that are crowned and inspired at the top of the tree. For more about the union of the Fool with the Shekinah, Shin with Tao, Shmakov goes into that in quite sublime detail, because Shmakov is where this theory of the Decad really is explained in amazing detail, and it really makes quite beautiful sense by the time you get to the Fool, which is I like to think that all these characters who've written these wonderful tarot books kind of embody one of the archetypes and the arcanum, particularly a bit more than others. Moebius is like the magician. I think Tomberg is very much like the hermit, and you can see the emphasis he gives to that card, how much he loves it. Shmakov, I think, really is the Fool. So have I got anything else to say? No, because those are my earlier notes. So, okay. So that was my initial attempt at synthesizing the tarot with at least the Sephira on the Tree of Life. Now, of course, I haven't done anything with the pathways. That's a whole new kettle of fish. So I'm not going to say anything about that because we've already done enough. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it and that it made sense, and any thoughts or questions, as always, would be welcome. Thank you for listening.